Welcome to Jesus Changes Everything, a daily podcast dedicated to providing a fresh look at the ancient and glorious truth that Jesus not only reigns, but is busy about the business of bringing all things under subjection, that celebrates the wonder and the glory that he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth.
I've often wondered why it is that we consider someone who believes X and we believe non-X. That is, there's a dispute, there's a disagreement. We think one thing, they think the opposite. Why we're so quick to accuse this person of being closed-minded? Why is non-X open-minded and X closed-minded when they're really just two different ideas? I believe we should have limited government. You believe we should have a strong social safety net, essentially a welfare state. What makes your idea broad-minded and mine small-minded or closed-minded? Well, I bring that up for us because today's ism is dogmatism. Dogmatism. Dogmatism is something we accuse our intellectual opponents of, essentially accusing them of being closed-minded. We're saying, wait a minute, you're not open to other ideas like you should be. A working definition is that it is an arrogant or stubborn insistence that one's views are correct. Well, why does it have to be stubborn or insistent for someone to believe that one's views are correct? I remember, like it was yesterday, having a conversation with a friend. I don't remember what it was we were talking about, but we were having some sort of theological discussion, and it was all very cordial. This was a friend, and I saw this person as a friend. This person saw me as a friend. And somewhere along the line, I got this response from my friend who said, "You think you're always right." And I smiled and said, "Oh, that is not true in the least. I know very well that I'm not always right. I will confess to this, however. I always think I'm right." My friend got a real confused look. I said, "What now?" I said, "Yeah, I don't think I'm always right, but I always think I'm right. And the same thing is true of you and anybody else." "Well, how can you say that you always think you're right?" Or excuse me, how can you say that you always think you're right and yet deny that you think you're right always? Well, it's very simple. So if you were to ask me, RC, do you have any mistakes in your thinking? I'd say, of course. If you could take every affirmation, every proposition that I affirm, the sky is blue, the grass is green, the Steelers are the greatest football team ever, etc., and just take every single affirmation and just lay it out there. And if you were to say to me, "Hey, RC, do you believe this one?" I'd say, "Yes." "This one?" "Yes." "This one?" "Yes." And you were to go through every single one of them. At the end, every single time, I'm going to say yes. And then if you said to me, "Well, do you think they're all right?" I'd say, "Well, no, of course not. Not a chance." "Well, which ones do you—" "I don't know. If I knew, I'd change my mind. If I knew, I'd get rid of them." We all know that we make errors. We just never know where those errors are, which means that everything we affirm, without being the least bit stubborn or dogmatic, whatever that means, everything that we affirm to be, in our judgment, correct. Nobody says, "I think the doctrine of total depravity is true, and yet it's wrong." Right? Nobody does that. Nobody says, "I think it's going to snow tomorrow, but it won't." We can believe, again, things that are wrong, but we don't believe them while we think they're wrong. So what is dogmatism? Well, I do think it can be a real thing. That you can shut your ears to counter arguments. You can say la 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 la. I can't hear you when someone gives a sound argument. You can take the view. I don't care what you say. In fact, I had another friend who was like that. We loved to sort of have philosophical discussions. It's not that unusual. I was a college student, so was my friend. His name was Hans. He's shown up in the podcast before in one of my Forever Friends segments. Hans and I love to have discussions about different things, and he was an engineering major, and I was a philosophy and literature major, so we were quite different, but very close friends, and we would dispute and argue back and forth, and one day he said to me, RC, you're not going to change my mind because the only reason you win is that you're a better arguer than I am. Well, I thought to myself, well, good for him for recognizing that I'm a better arguer than he is. But he's got to see that he's got a real problem here. I said, well, Hans, I really enjoy these conversations, and it doesn't really trouble me when you don't change your mind. But I got to tell you something. If that's your perspective, there's really no reason for these conversations to continue. If you're going to attribute the fact that you can't answer what I'm saying to my skill set as an arguer rather than the accuracy of what it is I'm affirming, then I can't help you. I'm trying to change your mind. I'm trying to persuade you. And what we're all supposed to do is when we lose, when we see a compelling argument, we're supposed to say, okay, I guess you're right. Here's what dogmatism is. A woman takes her husband to see the psychiatrist. She says, Doc, you got to help my husband. He thinks he's dead. And the doc looks at him and says, you think you're dead? He said, oh, I'm absolutely dead. Are you sure? I'm definitely dead. He said, well, let me ask you something. He said, do dead men bleed? He said, no, I don't know. Dead men don't bleed. The doctor comes around the side of his desk and he says, you're sure now? He said, I'm sure. Dead men don't bleed. And so he takes the man's hand and he sticks his finger with a needle and blood comes out. The doctor says, now what do you say? He said, I can't believe it. I cannot believe I've been such a fool all this time. What do you know? Dead men do bleed. If you really want a good resolution for the new year, how about this one? You need to resolve to lead your home, if you're a man and a husband, to lead your home as a husband and as a father. Remember that when God pronounced his curse upon Eve in the Garden of Eden, he told her that her desire would be for her husband. Most scholars would affirm that the nature of the curse here isn't that Eve would have a desire to be with her husband, but that she would have a desire to be like her husband, to rule over him. God does not pronounce a corresponding curse on Adam, that he would desire to take the place of his wife, that he would desire to follow rather than to lead. It may be that such a curse would have been redundant. Adam, after all, rather than protecting and guarding Eve against the wiles of the serpent, followed her into rebellion. Adam went further still in relinquishing his role when, as God asks him about the fall, he replies, "It was the woman." Instead of guarding his wife, he hides behind her leafy skirt. From that time forward, men have continued to skirt their responsibilities, to evade their calling. We have not merely failed to fight to wear the pants in our homes. We've happily handed the pants over not only to our wives, but to our children. We've not only not ruled in our homes, but have let autonomy in the door. We have embraced, at best, The theory that leadership in the home means that when husband and wife, after countless hours of discussion and prayer, cannot reach agreement, then the husband must decide. I call it the tie goes to the husband. We call this being sensitive. We call it servant leadership. We call it adapting to the times. We call it everything but what it is, rebellion against the living God. Our families are a wreck by and large because we husbands are a wreck. They are floundering because we are not leading. We are not leading because we are cowards. We are afraid of the watching world, and so we cave in to its egalitarian mindset. We're afraid of our wives, and so succumb to their desire to rule. We're afraid of our children, and so leave them as orphans. We would rather lead at work, where there are clear lines of authority, than lead at home, where the ultimate authority, God Himself, put us in charge. Reformation, friends, will not come to our land until it comes to our churches. It will not come to our churches until it comes to our homes. It will not come to our homes until fathers take back their pants and take up their mantle. We lead our families as we turn back to sola scriptura. We are led by the Spirit-breathed Word of God rather than the spirit of the age. And we turn back to faith alone, sola fide, following in the footsteps of our eternal husband, the second Adam. We trust Him and Him alone, walking by faith and not by sight. We will not have reformation until we recover an understanding of the priesthood of fathers. We will not have reformation until we recover an understanding of the prophetic call of fathers. We will not have reformation until we recover an understanding of the kingship of fathers. We will not have reformation until we seek once more to be Jesus in our homes, in His grace, in our need, and for His glory.
You've been listening to the Jesus Changes Everything podcast, a production of Dunamis Fellowship, the teaching outreach of Dr. R.C. Sproul Jr. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to subscribe, which you can do at all the usual outlets, to tell your friends, and to spread the word. To learn more about the work of Dunamis Fellowship, please visit rcsproulJR.com. And join us next time on Jesus Changes Everything.